Jacob's Ladder is quite simply the story of a man who is killed in Vietnam. And the opening of the movie is real time. And these men erupt in a drug-induced psychosis and end up killing each other. And Jacob is bayoneted. And from the moment he is bayoneted, you begin this journey into death. And what happens in that journey is the mind goes through this extraordinary kind of dissolution and attempt at discovery of what is going on. And I really believe that in this death process, there is enormous need at the final moments of one's existence to know what it was, what your life was, what it meant, how did it come to its conclusion. And if you have a sudden death, an unexplainable death, I think there's an incredible urge for the mind to try to piece it together, to try to figure out the how and why of his finality.
It's an extraordinary story because it sort of matters to us all.
I'm not dead.
It's about what concerns us all. It's about living and dying and what it's going to be like. So I felt it was worth doing.
When I first wrote Jacob's Ladder, part of my conceit, in a way, was to bring archetypal, almost medieval imagery of the demonic into 20th century life. And Adrian just said, no, I don't want to go with those images. I want something else. I want something different.
It's tough to do that stuff without, A, people laughing, or B, anyway, recognizing it and thinking, well, I've seen that before. So that was the challenge, really, was to do something they hadn't seen before. And that was frightening for that reason.
Adrian was very aware that when you see horns on someone, then it's no longer human. Then it's something other. And when it's other, it's frightening, but it's not as frightening as when it is partly human, when it is still an extension of what you are, of what you could be. And that's really where true fear lies, because it's easy to dismiss angels and demons as angels and demons, but you can't dismiss them when they're part of your human psyche.
The exciting thing for me, really, was to do something that was sort of rooted in flesh, really. You know, going back to the demonic side of things. And finally, I found the word thalidomide, you know, these distortions of the flesh, these things that we can't dismiss because they're real. And so using imagery of, say, Francis Bacon, because of the blurred kind of imagery that he uses, where you can't quite see what's going on because there's movement in it, and you get a sense that there's something quite ghastly going on in that shadow, you know what I'm saying, that I'm not seeing clearly. So that was a kind of a premise for the movie. Never let people see stuff too clearly or for too long. If you think about the devil, instead of using like bat wings, you know, you think of those kind of big bat wings, then I always made them almost be like kind of distortions of shoulder blades, so that you've got a sense of the bone structure underneath. I mean, when it was a tail, rather than doing that, the kind of animal tail, it was almost like a penis, actually. It was very bizarre at the beginning of the movie. So that when the audience saw this stuff, they couldn't quite cope with it. They couldn't quite recognize it, and yet they couldn't dismiss it.
My first instinct on reading the script was that this was an unplayable role if you didn't find the lightness in it. That would be unwatchable. You could not watch this man go through the torture that he goes through if he doesn't have a need to live a life that's normal, a life that has some joy in it.
We had to kind of cast against type a little bit. I think if it'd been gaunt and sort of depressing to start with, it would never have worked. Tim had a kind of an innocence. He was like a little boy, and that was important for this film, I think, for you to care for him, but also for him to have a sense of humor.
Fun with bananas.
A man that is going crazy, or a man who has visions or hallucinations or flashbacks, really lives for the light moments. He doesn't live for the dark moments. He doesn't want his life to be that way.
Jessie is really a collage of many women. Probably every woman he's ever met in his life she's a little bit of a child. She's a little violent. She's very much a woman. She's the mother. She's the enemy. She's the friend. She's the perfect lover. She's the antithesis of every lover in the world. She's his wife. She's his child. She's a little complicated.
It was interesting, really, casting this character because she had to have a kind of an erotic, womanly, fleshy quality, you know, a nice quality. But she also had to have the other end of the scale, which was this kind of strength. She had to give you the evil, and that's something that Elizabeth Peña really gave us.
He's a priest, he's a father, he's a doctor, he's a psychiatrist, he's a philosopher. I think Louis is very bright, but emotionally unstable.
Louis is the voice of wisdom. He is the guru, he is the teacher, he is the mentor, he is the person who truly comes into your life to give you insight into what is happening.
When you pick up Jacob's Ladder and you look at it and read it through, you say, this is magnificent. But how do you do it? Where do you begin? Where's the middle? I mean, what is it? It's fantastic. It's an exciting project, and only a person that's very brilliant, as I feel Adrian is, can do this.
I didn't do this film in a conventional way. I did it with all of the special effects being in camera, being at the time, which sort of made it nightmarish, I think. I'm sure it's the most difficult way to do it. But I think maybe it has a kind of a different look because it was real, because there was nothing that was make-believe, you know what I'm saying? There was nothing that was optical, really. You know, so we had things that had to shake, you know, and I was doing effects within the camera. I was turning over, for example, at 4 frames rather than 24 frames and getting actors to kind of wave their head around. And we kind of started to call it Vibro Man. And when you blurred it in whatever way one used, it suddenly, you couldn't see it clearly. So there was a sense of maybe what you weren't seeing was awful, was worse than what you were seeing. Do you see what I'm saying? So your imagination had to fill in the hole. When there's birds flying past his head, we used a camera rig that he wore. He strapped this camera rig on him, and it was looking at him in the face, right? So whenever he moved, the camera moved with him. It was attached to him. So it gives a very disorientating and weird effect. She's having sex with the devil, really. I mean, that's what it was meant to be. And it was tough to do. I mean, just mechanically to make all of those elements come together was difficult. And one of the things that helped was the lighting. We used strobe lighting, so not quite sure what you're seeing, whether you miss something. But you had to tie together all of these elements. You had to tie together a stuntman waving one wing, so-called, you know, this kind of thalidomide sort of rib-like thing that it represents the wing of the devil, if you like. And we had hooves that, again, were kind of looked sort of thalidomide. They looked sort of flesh-based. They didn't really look like an animal's hooves. Elizabeth was concerned about this particular scene, you know, where she's having sex with the devil, and she wanted whoever was potentially going to be the devil, she wanted it to be a friend, you know, so that whoever was doing the bumping and grinding would be somebody at least that she knew. The culmination, if you like, the orgasm, if you like, of that sequence is that a horn comes out of her mouth. Speaking of that, man, all these things.
Gordon has as many horns as he has packets of
Challenger.
We did it in 2 ways, really. We did it so that we started off the suggestion of a horn with her actually having one in her mouth, having kind of like a tiny one, like the rest was down her throat. And then we used a model very quickly, very briefly, for the actual shooting out of the horn at the end. And because it's so quick, you really don't understand that bit is a model, and what you saw before was her for real. Yeah, but you can't push it up. But that's pretty good fun. That's gross, isn't it? Jesus Christ. But with the strobe and shit, it should be out there. Yeah. Should be out there. This is it. Be out there. Right? Well, let's do it. When you come back to him in the bath, it's almost otherworldly. It's extraordinary, the effect on his face. When it's this very slow pullback, and his eyes are red-rimmed. He's crying. And he looks like he's reborn or something. I mean, it's just the most extraordinary shot, I think. I mean, it was just amazing.
I remember how excited Adrian got when we were talking about the journey into hell through the hospital, down hospital corridors into the realm of hell. Now, that was originally the wall disappeared and there was the void, but Adrian didn't want to do the void. He wanted it to be concrete, and so we created this journey on a gurney down a hospital corridor that started to get stranger and stranger and stranger.
Stand by and action!
When I was on the set and Adrian was shooting that, it was really fascinating to me because he did something that was so simple, and so amazing. He had them take the wheel on the back of the gurney and shorten it so that it didn't connect with the floor. So it would just spin, 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 spin. And when you see that gurney going down the floor, the tension of that, the power of that is unbelievable. And it's something Adrian could never have said to me, but it was always there in some kind of incipient form, and it happened when we were shooting.
There was one particular photograph that I saw of that Joel Peter Witkin did, who has done some pretty hair-raising, kind of macabre stuff. But one particular image was the trunk of a man, of a black man, without legs. And he was on this sort of framework his body was kind of perched on. And he had like a death mask. But what was so horrifying about it was that the head was in movement. The head was was kind of in torment and was a blur. The rest of the body was sharp.
It was actually Adrian's idea to put Jesse in the operating room, but it was right that Jesse be there. It was right that she be part of that sort of vision when he's in that space. And you really do get a sense that Jesse is part of the force of darkness, and it really does allow you this moment of trying to be able to separate from Jesse and realizing that you want to get away from Jesse. You want to reach for the goodness, the light, and you are fearful of her and her presence.
The special effects people did, very believable gore. And I mean, I would walk in and go, oh, I'll open my eyes and you say, Roland.
He keeps on being told that he's dead, and he's clinging on to life and saying, I'm not dead. And he sees Jesse there who won't help him. And he was just howled. It was like a cri de coeur. It was extraordinary. I mean, I was bowled away. I was crying like a baby watching him, and I couldn't see because of the tears, you know.
The movie is really a movie of Jacob holding on. It's Jacob holding on to what he remembers. It's holding on to his guilt. It's holding on to his pleasures, his desires, everything that makes us hold on to life in an everyday experience. Holding on to your breath, holding on to your identity, to your sense of self. These are the things that keep us here. And as that starts to be taken away from him, as it's unraveled, and he's watching the unraveling of that, what he experiences is the end of his being. And that end is something you can fight, or you can finally say yes to. And because it is so inevitable in his case, as it will ultimately be in every one of our cases, we all have to, at some moment, learn that the release from the struggle is the letting go.
I thought that it would be interesting if Jacob had a son who had died previously and who he would be reunited with at the end of the movie. And one aspect I really liked of it was that presumably the person who had been in heaven or wherever this place would be would have a kind of an insight that the person visiting or the person coming there wouldn't have. So there would be a kind of an interesting role reversal. I loved the idea of the character of Gabe, the child, effectively being an adult for his father and looking after his father because he knew the ropes. He knew what was going to happen. I do like the idea of the possibility of a kind of a reunion when you die. The idea of maybe meeting people who have died and seeing them again. I'd like to see my father again. I'd like to see if I could work it out better this time round than I did the last time round. And that seems to be a fairly logical, interesting, and kind of personal way of looking at dying.
The great moment of the ending when you realize he just died on an operating table in Vietnam is the realization that the whole movie was a journey through his brain, through his mind. It was the journey of the bardo, the last stages of his mind and any human mind that is dying.
He manages to embrace death, and so his demons become angels.
It is every man's journey, that we all go through this extraordinary process of dissolution in which we are compelled to hold on to everything dear to us. We're compelled to hold on to our children. We're compelled to hold on to those we love. We feel guilt about the things we didn't do. We feel the pull of this dark force coming at us, and we don't want to go to it. There's great denial in our struggle, in our death struggle, in our movement out of our bodies, out of our familiarity, out of our breath, out of our mind, out of our personality. It's a hard leap to make.
I've had a lot of people write to me about the film. I had somebody with an AIDS society saying, can I use imagery from within the film because they thought that the film had helped friends of theirs in the dying process, and that's immensely rewarding, I think, if that's the case. Because I hope that the movie helps you to deal with that in some little way.